Welcome to another episode of the Peak Potential Success Show. My name is Fong. I'm an entrepreneur, a business strategist, a real estate investor, a speaker, and also a best-selling author. Every single day, I have the opportunity to help others unlock the potential and guide them to succeed. More often than not, I see people not reaching potentials, not taking action because they have a missing link. Whether that's a connection, a interview, a podcast, a strategy, a tip, a perception, a story, whatever it is that's stopping them from getting over that hump. That's why we have this show, so that every single week when you tune in, there's going to be nuggets of knowledge and wisdom so that you can unlock your potential and maintain that level of success and then reach a new peak potential and achieve things you never even dreamed of. Today, I'm very excited to have a very, very special guest. He's an amazing person. I was able to meet up with him a few years ago at a conference, connect with him, and just learn so much from him. He is known as the coach of all coaches, the Yoda of all speakers. He is also the jack of all trades, but to me, he's probably the king of all trades. He is an amazing marketer, he is an amazing brander, and when he talks to you, he makes you feel like you're the most amazing, most important person in the world. So please welcome the Mark Anthony Bates.
I love it. That's awesome.
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on my show. Now, I know you're connected with a lot of people. I know you have a lot of businesses and a lot of deals going around and lots of projects going on. What is going on in the world of the Mark Anthony Bates right now? What is motivating you? What are some challenges that you're facing? And just what is your passion right now?
For you and for your audience, the things that I do were kind of unique for myself as well. And so most of the motivation comes from my drive of why, right?
Yeah.
And so in doing that, what I work on is challenge solving, pain relief. And so the pain relief that I work on right now is how can I help relieve global pain for the masses? And where are the things that are happening? What causes? So you have to look at that as what causes the pain. So right now, people are saying, well, COVID-19 is causing the pain. COVID-19 is a symptom of pain.
Right.
COVID-19 is what initiated it and what created the circumstances to now what has created painful situations for a lot of people. Dire situations for some, opportunities for others. And certainly when people begin to move their mind as to going, okay, the three questions I always ask, and I have others ask, is what's good about this? What's the lesson? And what's the opportunity? Mm-hmm. Because Fong, where our mind focus is where it expands and where it goes most of the time. So if I'm always drawn towards something, so for example, you're familiar with what the RAS is, Reticular Activation System?
Not completely, no.
Okay, well, I'll explain it for you and your audience. So the reticular activation system is a part of our brain. It's not an actual part of the brain, but it's part of the brain that functions to where it searches for things and focuses on things that are relevant. Mm-hmm. So for example, if somebody bought a new car, or if they had a friend or a family member that got a new car, do you have a car where you are?
Yep.
Okay. When you first bought that car, did you notice more of them on the road?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Were there actually more of them on the road?
Probably not.
They were, but what happened was it became more relevant. So your brain, your reticular activation system began to look for that vehicle and notice it more often.
Right.
This happens in opportunities as well. So when you begin to shift where your focus is and you trigger your reticular activation system, mm-hmm. you begin to notice where all those opportunities are. And it's the same thing when we're going through the challenges that we're going through right now, that whatever we focus on most expands, and that's our reticular activation system. So if we were to focus on the news and we were focusing on things of the number of new cases and the number of deaths that occurred, our focus is going to be drawn towards that. Everything that we happen to notice in a news feed, every conversation that gets brought up, everything that's ever brought up on news, whether it's on TV or radio or magazines or whatever, that's where our focus goes, rather than saying, what is it about this that's going to be interesting about where the world is going? Mm-hmm. Because unless you can do something specifically to prevent either cure or to address the virus and what its outcomes are, that focus is not going to help you. It won't expand you. It won't drive you to where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So my focus is that I look at what's the new world look like? What are these new, post-COVID? What does it look like, and how can I begin to develop stuff now that may be beneficial for the future?
Right.
And so in doing that, though, it also keeps me focused on that rather than all the other noise around it, all the other negative, parts around me. And the thing that's important too is that it's okay for people to be fearful right now. It's okay because it's an unknown. We don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And in the U.S., we have the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression. Whereas, just 4 months before, we were at the lowest rate. Mm-hmm. And to go from that extreme so quickly, it's almost like when somebody experiences a loss, they go through certain steps of loss. And part of that is denial. And part of that is asking, what just happened? I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And most people weren't prepared for this because nobody in the world was prepared for this. Yet here in 1918, we during the Spanish flu, we had less technology. We had less ways to communicate. We had less ways to do what we're doing. And even though we were smaller then and all around the world, there are a lot of things we could have learned from that, and we should have learned to that. But as human beings, we have really good forgetters, mm-hmm. right? The further we got away from the 2008 Great Recession, the more people forgot about what it felt like. And a lot of people that were younger never really experienced it and wouldn't know how to interpret it. But so now when we get to this, we're going, okay, for those of us that remembered and said, what did we learn from that and how did we prepare for that? We began to prepare. But even for me, I didn't do all the things. I wasn't ready for a pandemic.
Right.
This one to spread so quickly. But that's the difference of what we have right now too, is the travel aspect of what we're doing, where people can just jump on a plane and within 12 to 18 hours later be on the other side of the world. And everything that we have within us comes with us.
Right.
And then is brought, and that's how it's brought. And I think a lot of the things where I'm very, very challenged with right now is I'm challenged with our government. I'm challenged with our government on why they're focusing on doing things to say negativity about China when all these things can be addressed afterwards. But in the U.S., about 90% of our personal protection equipment is manufactured in China. So it's like if there's a big bear, mm-hmm. and you kick it and say, hey, I want me food and not beat me up, and so I don't understand. I mean, excuse me, that's not true at all. I completely understand where it comes from. I just don't understand why it's coming at a time when we need to be working and coalescing together. Mm-hmm. And the last call that I was doing, what I'm in the process of doing right now, I couldn't even go. We wouldn't have time on this call. I mean, I'm actually working, with Airbus directly, mm-hmm. and Air Canada. The maintenance and engineering director there has been sharing with me insights because I had an idea that I wanted to bring out the Airbus A380s for the international air carriers that aren't using them. They're all parked. And I said, okay, how do we do that? And we pull out all the seats, and then we can fill it up with PPE and bring it into the areas in the U.S. where it's needed. And so in order to do that, it's not as simple as that. I also know that the plane's really, really heavy, and only certain airports and runways and taxiways can handle that weight. And if I'm going to be working, going to be working this week with the Nevada governor, and then and creating and presenting to him to do a coalition of 5 other states. The reason I chose the 5 southwestern states was because they're all within their major distribution center is all within 12 hours drive time from mm-hmm. Nevada or from Las Vegas. So if we bring in these Airbus A380s full of PPE, we can take that and load that onto trucks that go to their designated states. So now the states are working together to help support each other. Wow. And then we look at that too. I go, okay, what are the logistics with that as far as money and payment? And if we get a fund put together between the 6 states, rather than invoicing state by state or working state by state, I said, well, let's get the MGM Mirage Resorts holding group to go ahead and be the trustee for the account. Mm-hmm. So now we're only invoicing one account, and they're making sure that the money is going where it's supposed to go. So they're protecting all the states at the same time. but it doesn't require to go through all the red tape and the minutiae and the bureaucracy of the state-by-state basis.
Wow.
So when I look at when I look at these challenges, I look at it from a micro, and then I begin to narrow it down to a micro, from a macro to a micro. So you look at the big picture and then, okay, what has to happen before that? What has to happen before that? And then you finally get down to that core of how you operate it. How do you bring in people that have skill sets and competency levels and connections that you don't have?
Right.
So going through each one of these steps, I had to deal with the Las Vegas McCarran Airport to make sure that they could handle the weight. They can. I had to go ahead and vet my crazy idea of being able to bring in, this stuff and operate these aircraft in an airport that doesn't accept them, and have the director of communications. And I say, tell me if I'm crazy. And he said, you're crazy, but you're crazy enough to make this work. I like what you've done. But then the next step he said was, I'm sure I'm missing something, so I need to put my logistic team together. Can we do a call the next day? So we do a call with the logistic team, and I want you to pay attention to what I did with this, how I managed the call. What I did is I told them on it, I said, I'm going to explain to you what my concept is. I'm going to break it down step by step as to what it is, not just delivering the mask with an A380, but all the other things that I've thought of that to cover that ground. Then I want you to find reasons why it won't work. I want you to poke holes in it. Okay, once you poke holes in it, if I have not satisfactorily answered those questions and thought it out for you, I want you then to turn your cap around, and I want you to come up with 3 viable ways that we can go ahead and come up with solutions to make the things work that I haven't thought of. And so what I've done by doing that is I've asked them to purposely look for reasons why it wouldn't work if I'm handling the objection. And then when I tell them to turn their cap around and look at it from another direction, I literally have shifted their mind.
Wow.
Going a 180 from pay attention to why it won't work to come up with ways how it will work. Okay, so I was very deliberate about how I languaged that. And then the other thing at the end, what I always ask, and I learned this from a friend of mine, is tell me the question, tell me what I'm not asking you that I should be asking you. Because that shifts them again to think about, oh, we didn't go over this, or we didn't talk about that. So these are all deliberate ways of communicating, of bringing people together to work with, of developing rapport, of them understanding that I don't know it all. And then, but for every question, I will say this, for every question they had a challenge, I had the absolute answer for it. So I did okay. But the steps were, hey, who do you get in touch with? And I had to make a decision. Which airlines would I reach out to? So the first thing I had to do is look up who has Airbus A380s. And for those of you who don't know what an A380 is, it's the double-decker Airbus. It's the largest passenger airliner in the world. But none of them, except for one prototype, was ever made for cargo. So now we have another issue. How do we get the product in and out of there? Because you have passenger doors. And what I told them was, we're going to use catering trucks. And there's 4 doors on each side that we can access. There's more doors, but there's only 4 doors that the catering trucks can access. So we're going to take those and we're going to offload all the product onto those catering trucks. And once they're filled up, they back up and another one comes right in behind it. And it continues the offload process. And then they're taken to the trucks that are already designated to which state that they're going to go to. So they unload that onto those trucks. The other challenge that we had that the director brought up and said, the crews, if it's coming in from China, they have to be quarantined for 14 days. Yeah. And I said, no, this is how we're going to resolve that. We're going to take out all the seats except for the first class suites that have the nice full beds and they're enclosed suites, and we're going to seal them off. And so the crew is going to stay on board the aircraft. We're going to cater it with extra food for the night, but they're only going to have to stay the night and get their legal rest. And they're going to be able to fly back the next day. So they never exit the aircraft, so they don't have to go under quarantine. So then the next question was, I said, well, I don't want to fly the aircraft. It's called ferrying. Ferrying is when you don't have any passengers or cargo. So I said, what does China need? Well, China needs soybeans. China needs a lot of other commodities. So I reached out to the commodity brokers and I said, what I want you to do is find out which farmers, which commodity groups could have the soybeans delivered to the airport. So once we empty it, we fill it back up. And now we charge whoever it's going to. So now we've gone ahead and reduced the operating expenses of the plane and potentially brought it into a profitability by delivering there. So now it's being cross-utilized.
Mhm.
Okay.
Wow.
These are all things that are happening. But the other thing that I look at this and I go, I need to make sure that, how many people can I benefit for this? Not just the delivery of PPE, but how many people can we put to work? Well, we're going to put to work the flight crew and the pilots for the airlines that we use, and those planes now become revenue generating for the airline that they're not generating revenue. In McCarran Airport, the international airport in Las Vegas, catering is all but shut down. Well, now we're going to put catering jobs back to work by loading and unloading that equipment. So we put them to work. And then I look at it, I go, okay, well, what about the trucking? Well, let's get the local trucking companies in Las Vegas and also the food companies that aren't delivering to the hotels and the casinos, and we'll put those drivers and companies to work delivering.
Wow.
Well, now I put work, right? So each step of the way. And then the other thing too is that the Airbus A380s don't service McCarran Airport, so they don't have any maintenance guys that can work on an A380. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling 3 to 4 maintenance Airbus A380 maintenance guys from LAX, and they're going to come over. And so what I've told them to do is I said, I want you to go back into I want you to go back and do the research and find how many different things can go wrong with the plane to make it go maintenance and where there's a pattern. And then I want you to make sure you have excessive parts for every one of those things. I want you to bring in extra tires. I want you to bring in extra brake pads so that we minimize the risk of the plane being stuck in there when it has a maintenance issue. Mm-hmm. So again, it's putting people to work. And on this whole thing, what I do is I make the governor of Nevada look good. I make MGM look good because I don't need credit. I don't need the authorship. I just want to make stuff happen. I just want to make the shit happen and make it happen fast. But it doesn't happen with one person. I'm the creator, but I can coalesce the teams to make that happen. So that's just one of many things. And by doing this, I'm creating a beta test so that we can get the bugs out, and then we'll keep getting more and more planes, and then we'll replicate that all throughout the US. And then what I'm doing is making an open source platform for us to share all the things that we learn, so every other country in the world can take what we've done, and then they can start to utilize it if they choose to in their country. And part of what had to happen during this is when I got in touch with the vice president of operations at Airbus, and I told him what I wanted to do. He said, well, we can't take the seats out. There's an airworthiness thing, and there's this. And I said, well, actually, no, I've already done a lot of research on that. And I told him we're gonna get a special airworthiness certificate for this, just for this. And I said, and he goes, yeah, but there's a lot of this. We've never run simulations on it. I said, you can run the simulations. And I said, here's the other thing. Air Canada pulled out all the seats on their 777s, and they're operating that to go get PPE. I said, I can't imagine that Boeing and Air Canada can do something that Airbus can't, can I? And he went, I'm going to get my engineers on this. So, you see how I switched that, because that's their competition, and they don't want to believe that they can do something that they can't. So what I had to do, though, did you understand what I had to do? Is I also had to shift his focus. His focus was why we couldn't do it, not how can we.
Right.
And so your audience wants to remember that no matter how important, no matter what level a person's at in their life, whether they're a CEO of a big major company or of a country, but that they're still human, and the way that they think there's some patterns that we can do. All right. Yeah. And when you recognize those patterns and you know how to interrupt them and do a pattern interrupt, and then insert a suggestion or a way of getting them to rethink, now you've got another continuation of the process. Make sense?
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Like a lot of the stuff that you talked about really, as you have the relationships, you have asking the right questions, diverting focus, like all that stuff is really just very fascinating. I like how you put that all together, and it's just amazing. Now, you talked about relationships as well. Now, how do you find that building relationships, and what are the key main factors of building good strategic relationships so that you're able to connect everybody together and then having people see your vision?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is you want to go in with the attitude of contribution first, asking second. Okay. So when I'm going in there, the way I approach that, if I were to say something going, look, I have a crazy idea. I think it's going to help a lot of people out, not only save lives, but I think it's going to be an opportunity to go ahead and put people back to work in your airport, in your state. And I'd like to be able to share it with you. And then I'd like you to be able to tell me, you know, is it too crazy, and how we might make it work. So you see, right off the bat, before I asked him to think about it and to share it with him, I wanted to make sure that I was coming in, that I had already thought in advance about how I can improve the life of others within their sphere. Okay. Now, and keep in mind too, that you don't have to have, improving somebody's life is not just about how can you put people back to work? How can you do this? Improving somebody's life is making them laugh. When you can come up with a way that entertains somebody, that makes them some humor, that made them laugh, to make them, you know, and then make them think. So the association with you is a positive one. Excuse me. Excuse me. It ends up being that when those, and there's a chemical reaction to that, right? There's endorphins, you know, there's all sorts of things that occur, dopamine, that occur when we are experiencing, you know, feeling good. So I'll give everybody an example. When trying to reach out to somebody, so I get people all the time who send me friend requests, and if I don't know who they are, if I haven't met them, or if I don't put down that there's a good connection for the, you know, mutual people we have, I think I have close to 700 people in the queue right now that have been there for a long time. And it doesn't mean that we didn't happen to meet, or they didn't hear me speak, like, you know, how we met. Well, you know, we met on multiple circumstances. But what happens is if somebody sends me a message first, and by the way, there may be some people listening to this that when they heard me speak at the last Mega, they sent me a message and it goes into the spam box, and I need to go there and look, you know, so because sometimes that's where it ends up. But I'll give you an example. So there's this guy, his name is John Carlton, and he's known as his thing is he's the most ripped off copywriter in the world. He's brilliant. He's been around a long time. And some years ago, I wanted to connect with him, but I also wanted to demonstrate to people how you can get to that thought leader, the guru, the expert, whatever. So when I sent him a message on there, I said, you know, I started off with saying, hey, I see we have a couple of mutual friends, you know, that you may know and really like. And the reason that I chose those mutual friends is because I saw him post something about them. So I know he knows them well enough to post something about them, and that he likes them. All right. The next step was I go in there and I said, so if if people were to tell you about me, if you were to ask about me, there's a lot of people out there, you know, that I've heard talk about me that say that I can walk on water, that I can leap tall buildings in a single bound, and that I can spin lead to gold. And I said, so I'd like to address all three of those issues. Number one, when I started to believe this stuff that people said, I went out the other day and I tried walking on water in my friend's pool, and I sunk 12 feet down to the bottom. So that one's not true. Second one was I tried to leap over a one-story building, and I almost broke my nose because I hit the wall. So that one's not. The third one is I tried spinning lead to gold, and now I just got back from my doctor, and he says I have acute lead poisoning. So that's not true either. But what I can tell you about me is this. And so what I've done is I've connected by having a couple people where there's that connection, you know, mutual connection. I immediately went in and I did self-deprecation and made him laugh. So now he had the humor with it. And then I went in to tell him what I believe my skill sets are. And then to continue on by saying, I want nothing from you. This is not a reach out. I'm not looking to collaborate, although I'm open to it. I don't want anything from you. I don't need anything from you. I just wanted to reach out to you because I'm respectful, and I'm appreciative of your work. And so I wanted to connect. And I go, and if we got a chance to do coffee sometime, that would be awesome. And if not, if you were to reject me, I hope that with your mad skill sets, you would do it in such a way that I would actually look forward to you rejecting me. So, wow. And he responded immediately. And the first thing he said was, yeah, I reached out to Melanie and Lori, and they have no idea who you are. And then he kidding. They spoke madly about you. But
Wow.
there isn't anything that you, Fong, or anybody on this audience couldn't do.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people that are trying to use, like I have a ton of people that reach out to me on LinkedIn and want to be, they want to be connected.
Mhm.
Why? Why do you want to be connected with me? Why should I want to be connected with you?
Right.
It's the people that send me a message and they craft it in such a way that I appreciate what they're asking or what they're doing.
Mhm.
And those are the people that I'll bring into my home. I mean, would you want, you don't want to have somebody just knock on your door and try to sell you something and you're going to go ahead and buy it and invite them in.
Mhm.
But if they start talking to you about things that matter to you, and then they give you a way to connect that relationship and what matters to you with whatever their product or service or message is, then they're much more open-minded to it, right?
Right. Now, for yourself, like you have a vast amount of experience in connecting with people, building relationships in business, and it just feels like it's second nature to you. At least from me, it sounds like it's second nature to you. So for those introverts out there who's afraid to go out there and speak, or let alone be fun or be entertaining, what would you say is the very first step that those people need to do to at least get that approach out there?
Are you an introvert, Fong?
I don't think I am. I have various levels of myself.
Okay. So the first thing is typically with introverts, a lot of things, sometimes they overthink things,
Mhm.
right? And they begin to think about what happened. And this is not just them. This is anybody that fears rejection. What if they reject me, that I'm trying to reach out to them? What if she rejects me if I ask her out? What if he rejects me if I tell him I'm interested, right? I don't ever think about that when I'm in the process. I just make sure that it doesn't come up, because you've heard me talk about F the how, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully now that book will be out maybe by the end of the year.
Uh-huh.
But you don't need to know the how to it to start doing it. For people that are introverted and they're trying to connect with others, everything that I just said about contribution first,
Mhm.
it's still in the same place. If somebody begins to go through and they start to paint a picture or a story of, well, if I reach out to them and they say I'm stupid, or this is a dumb idea, or I don't want your product, or I don't want your service, or I don't want to go out with you. Okay. So what they've done is they've gone through that process, and I just say next. Or I'll ask them a question and go, hey, is there a way that I could have approached you that you would have been much more open to my ask?
Mhm.
I guarantee if people ask that, and by the way, the more you ask that, the more desensitized you become to it, which means you think less about rejection.
Mhm.
So if that happened, if somebody asked me that, it would be a pattern interrupt because nobody asked me that. And I would turn around and go, well, you know what, Fong? What you could have done is maybe approached me this way and said this, and that would have opened up my mind. That would have made me much more open to hearing about your product, service, message, or going out with you. But Fong, I'm sorry, you're married, dude, and I'm straight. So.
I'll get over it.
But my point of that, of going through and talking about that, is it's all on how you language your words, how you approach. What's your mindset when you're going into it? If your mindset is going in there of fear of rejection, there's a lot of good chance that that's what's going to happen. Because remember, what we focus in on expands. And the moment one thing happens, even if you're not being rejected, if your mind is focused on that, all of a sudden it begins to look for that and it goes, is that a rejection? Ooh, I think that's a rejection.
Mhm.
Oh, back off, fear, flight or fight response, so I'm going to fly. I'm going to get out of it.
Mhm.
But I'll give you an example. Many, many years ago, when I was married, I had a company, and because of something we couldn't foresee, almost, like what's happening now, some other company came in and literally put us out of business almost overnight.
Mhm.
And it was a tough time. And when I was married, and my beautiful bride at the time, Kayla, I came home. I mean, we had put everything into it. $500,000, everything. We leveraged everything. And I came in, and she's sitting down there watching, or she's looking at the bills, and she's crying. And I came in and I just said, honey, what's wrong? And she said, how are we going to pay these? How are we going to survive? Mm-hmm. And immediately I went into this state of, oh my God, if it were just me as an entrepreneur, I can get over it. I can be a minimalist and I can go on. But now I had somebody else I was responsible for, that I had inflicted this pain with, who believed in me. And it really shook me up. And so I looked at that and I began to think, I said, God, I'm a failure as a business person. I'm a failure as a provider. I'm a failure as a husband. And I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. And I went into a very deep depression. And I'd never had that experience before. And the more different types of antidepressants they gave me, the more crazy it got. Right. So the only way I could come up with an idea to get out of it was to I had a life insurance policy. And you know, I figured if I was gone, she'd be taken care of. Right. And that was more important to me. And so I needed to make it look like an accident. And I'm very creative, and I came up with a way that's what was going to happen. And the point of that being, though, is that when we get into such deep, dark places and we start thinking about that stuff, you know, what if I had followed through with that? I mean, I was ready to follow through with it. And fortunately, a therapist picked up on something I said, and I never mentioned suicide, but it was enough to where they wanted to put me into a 72-hour observation, lockup. And let me tell you how I got through this. I had to convince them that I was no longer thinking about that. And in that process of convincing them, I convinced myself. Wow. I convinced myself why it was important that I stuck around. I convinced myself how this would be a learning experience that I could gain and make it better and have a better relationship with my wife at the time. And even though we're not married anymore, we're still best of friends. I mean, she called me up 2 years ago and said, I want you to know that the stuff that I wasn't ready to learn from you back when we were married, that I've applied now in my marriage, has made my marriage so much stronger, and I want to thank you. Wow. And that meant a lot. But I don't want to digress on this. I'm just saying that there's nothing that we eventually can't get through. And the ultimatum of committing suicide is the end. And it's not. There's so many other ways, but I never understood before I was in it that when people did it, I said, I don't get it. What could be that dark? What could be that bad? And there are a lot of people right now that are contemplating that because of what we're going through. And all I can say to those people is, if you or someone you know is experiencing that, it sounds contrite, but this too shall pass. This too shall pass, and we can make things better. I am working on so many different things that are going to have an impact on the world. That it's crazy. That's just one of the projects, because I have to categorize it by urgency, and that's the first thing that we need to get out. The second thing I'm working on right now is how do we create ways for people that are getting laid off on their jobs that only have one skill set. And this call that I did before it was to be able to teach people other skill sets to make them marketable to the new world, to the post-COVID world. Yeah. And stuff that they can do now to make a little bit of money, and then when they get out there, that they'll be much more marketable. I'm working on things like the other issue with the scarcity that we have of masks and quality masks. Because now what I've been doing is working with a mechanical medical engineer, a physicist, and a chemist, and I said I have an idea of how to sterilize the mask so that they can be reused 2 to 3 times more, and how to track it, and how to make sure that everybody's getting their mask back, and how we're able to go ahead and take this data and then import this data into a central location so that everybody around the world can use this process. And these guys didn't tell me I was crazy. They said, this is really awesome. Yeah. And then I come up with ways on how we can create new jobs as technicians. I came up with ways that, they were saying, and it's not, fortunately didn't happen, but we were going to have ventilator, shortages. Yeah. And so the next step is that a lot of the doctors and pulmonary specialists were saying, look, even if we have the ventilators, we won't have enough time we won't have enough people to operate them. So what are we going to do if we have them? And I said, okay, let's create a ventilation technician certification program so that people don't have to be medically trained, but they'll be trained just on how to operate ventilators and monitor them. And so in that process, I reached out to a friend of mine named Jim Quick, who owns a company called Quick Learning, KWIK. By the way, he's got a new book that just launched. You guys should check it out. It's Limitless. But Jim is brilliant, and he's connected to some super influential people. But he has an accelerated learning course. And I said, Jim, I want to take your course, and I want to be able to ramp that in and bundle it in with this certification program so that we can get technicians up and running very, very quickly. And now what we have done in that case is the technicians are supporting the medical staff. They can't incubate them, they can't do the other stuff, but they can monitor the volume of air that's being pushed into the lungs and the amount of oxygen. And if you have 5 technicians in a hospital or 10 technicians, you only need 1 nurse per 5 or 10 technicians to oversee them, rather than 1 nurse having to go through and monitor all of them. So what you've done, you've repositioned and allowed that nurse and those doctors to go help patients while you have these other people doing monitoring. And you put the people that are technicians to work, because now you've created a new job that didn't exist before.
Right.
And they have jobs. So right now in the U.S., it's about saving lives and then getting people back to work to earn an income.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Same thing with the mass sterilizations. I've learned so much about. I've been in the PP industry all of 8 weeks, which makes me an expert. I've learned so much about it, and there's so many people in here that shouldn't be in the industry that are talking a lot of stuff. But I've spent time. I reached out to 3M. I had 3 conversations with them. I reached out to the Minnesota State Attorney General's office to find out what the guidelines were for pricing, to make sure that we were compliant and not violating anything. And you know what? They all took my call. They don't know me. You and every single person on this call can do exactly the same thing I'm doing when it comes to reaching out to people.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, if I'm introduced by somebody, that's always a benefit. But I wasn't introduced to the director at the airport. I had to call around. I had to work my way up. I wasn't introduced well, no, that's not true. The guy at Airbus, the director of the airport, introduced me to. Okay, never mind that one. Scrap that one. But it's just, and the other thing too is, look at, this thing, this has got so many contacts. I bet you if the people watching this right now were to pull it out and just go through your contact list and scroll and go, who haven't I talked to for a while? And who can help me? Who can we collaborate with together to do something, make a difference on this? And there may be people you haven't talked to in 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, whatever. It's a common goal, but it's got to be something that everybody can buy into. And part of the challenge that some people have is they come up with a great idea and they come up with a very worthy cause. And then they wonder why everybody else isn't jumping onto that worthy cause. And it's not because the cause isn't a good one. It's just because it's my why, not yours. Just because I get excited about something doesn't mean you can get excited about it too. Right. But if I can sit there and have this cause and say, Fong, I have this idea about working on something, and I know you have some things that get you excited and you're passionate about. Can you share a few things with me so that then I may find where the crossover is? But call you and I ask you that, and then say, what are you passionate about? What are you working on? And maybe there's a way we can collaborate. And then if I can get your cause to also meld into my cause, now you're more excited and more driven to want to work together to produce, collaborate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Just a quick few things here.
I have to tell everybody on this call, I owe Fong a public amends because I call with him that he has scheduled that I completely misread. And so I am telling you, I screwed up on the last thing that he did. He's been awesome. And he's been also very kind in coming back to me for almost 2 years on this.
Yeah.
Trying to get me to go where I've said, yes, I would do it. But you know what? His persistence is what got me, because I have so many people that I'm very blessed that want to interview me, but I can only do so much because of the bandwidth. And I love you and your wife, and I'm looking forward to meeting your little baby, sometime when the time's right. But the fact he was persistent, and he did it in a really sweet way, and he didn't give up on me. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 3 quick questions for you. One word answers. Okay, just a little bit of fun. Do you have a hidden talent that you will perform?
Do I have a hidden talent that what?
That you would perform on stage.
Yeah, I can sing.
Awesome. And if you were to pick a coach between Yoda, Mr. Miyagi, or Gandalf, which one would it be?
Or Gandalf?
Yeah.
Miyagi.
Okay, now you have Mr. Miyagi at your house, and you have to prepare him your favorite dish. What are you going to cook him?
Chicken parm.
Awesome. And then finally, I have this quick thing. I have 3 cards here. 1, 2, 3.
Middle
Pick a
one.
number. Middle one? Okay, so I asked you the question, what is success like? And then you're going to say success is like this thing, and then you kind of refer to it. So success is like a dimple.
Success is like a dimple. When you look at the dimple on a beautiful woman sometime, and when she smiles, that smile that lights up your heart is the same thing that happens when you feel the success of everything else you do in your life.
Awesome. Thank you very much for all your time and your stories, your wisdom. It's been a pleasure having you here.
And I notice you have a couple of dimples. I'm smiling.
Awesome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you very much for doing this.
Take care. Say hi to your wife, okay? Make sure that you send my love over there, and I'm thinking about you guys.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you. Once again, thank you everybody for being here, watching the show, the Peak Potential Show. And until next time, today is the day to unlock your peak potential. I'll see you later.